You also need to know what to do with it, right? And that's where we think gaming really comes in, is that it gives kids the opportunity to practice.
So yes, we will definitely be diving into all those tips, where it works. And as you know, this is the Professor Game Podcast, where we interview people like Kerry who are successful and experienced gamification, game-based learning, game-based solutions, and game thinking experts, so we can gather all those insights and use it for our own situations and experiences. And I'm Rob. I am the founder, and I'm a coach, a consultant at Professor Game, and I'm also a teacher, professor at IU University, EBS University, EFMD, and many other places around the world. And if the stuff that you're hearing here makes sense for you, and you want to see how to implement it, how to make the best of this so you can use this in your own experience, feel free to book a clarity call. Details in the description. Engagers, so welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game Podcast. And we have Kerry with us today. But Kerry, we need to know, are you prepared to engage?
Absolutely.
Let's do this, because Kerry Flanagan-Owen is the Senior Manager of Learning Design at the Bill of Rights Institute. She leads the development of free K-12 civics, government, and U.S. history resources. And with a background in teaching and instructional coaching, Kerry brings deep expertise in designing engaging, inquiry-driven experiences for classrooms nationwide. Most recently, she spearheaded the creation of a series of card-based games as part of the Institute's Government and Politics, Civics for the American Experiment curriculum, using play to bring abstract civic concepts to life for high school students. Kerry, is there all the bunch of exciting stuff you're doing, is there anything else that we should be mentioning at this point before we dive into the questions?
No, I think you got it.
Amazing. Sounds great. So, Kerry, what do days look like with you? If we were to follow you, shadow you around for a day, week, month, whatever you want to go for, what does that look like? What are you doing these days?
Yeah. So at the Bill of Rights Institute, nothing is the same. No day is quite the same, which is really exciting. As you mentioned, I lead our learning design work, and I spend a lot of time collaborating with our content and our design team to think through how we can make civic learning more meaningful and engaging for students. Because a lot of times people think this is just boring content, and it's like, yes, it has that veneer, but it's actually super important, and it can be really fun and engaging to do. And so some days that looks like I'm reviewing just lessons and content that we're developing. Other days I'm kind of mapping out strategy and the direction that we're going to go, what new things we're thinking about trying, and how different things kind of work within the scope of what we're trying to do. I get to work closely with different partners. So sometimes that's game designers. Like on this particular project, we worked with the amazing team at Game Genius, which is Roddy McKenzie and Peter Williamson, who I believe has been on the show before.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, he's fantastic. They were great collaborators. And sometimes it's scholars, other educators. We really try and make sure that we bring in the voice of people that are in the trenches, because they can be the people who have the most to know about what's happening. And then we try and make sure that what we're building is creative, but also classroom ready. And a lot of what I do is kind of involves connecting the dots between the pedagogy, the design, the creation, the content, that student experience, just trying to make sure it's all something that could actually be used in the classroom for educators. And then outside of work, I am also the parent of a toddler, which is in itself a whole different experience, but also a very good experience in game design, because if you know anything about toddlers, every day is different, and every day
Mine
is
about 2.5, so yeah.
Same, right? And it's like, how do you motivate? How do you redirect, spark curiosity? So even just this morning, our favorite thing is, have you seen the mouse timer? It's this little mouse who eats apples every 15 seconds to lead up to cheese. And so our game is, can we get dressed before the mouse gets to the cheese? So every day it's a challenge.
Actually, I'm using the timer for meals right now because for some reason, she has our lunch in school in under 30 minutes. every time, every single time, because they have 30 minutes and that's it. They don't have more time. At home, we got to spend 1.5 hours on lunch, dinner, not breakfast. 1.5 hours. Like, that's insane. Initially, it's like, well, she's learning how to eat, the whole mechanic of that. And it was awesome. Like, I was super, super excited to see her grabbing the spoon, the fork, the knife. But then it's like, well, we've been through this. And I know that you do the same thing at school. They have 2 turns. There's 16 kids, so 8 and 8. I know you do it in 30 minutes. So you're using a timer for every sort of stage of the meal. So you use stages as well, and like 10, 15, and she can see it. Like, it's very visual. It's not a phone timer. It's a timer that's moving a
we
rainbow
have the rainbow
around.
timer. Yep. As well. We have that. Yeah.
So
it's amazing what time constraints can do for them.
Yeah. And very visual, like very visualized that you can see it there, and without screens, which was a challenge as well. And we were talking about civics education before, and history and politics and all that. And it was like, for me, literally, well, next to biology, maybe, like the worst subject was everything related to civics at school.
No.
Everything related to that. Biology, like, I did well in both of them, like any civics stuff and biology. I did okay. I did a lot better in math and other stuff. But I just hated it. It was horrible for me. But
I hear that so much.
There is a reason for it. I figured there was a reason. When I got to high school, they gave me this like huge, world history book. And for some reason, I kind of liked it a little bit better. But then I graduated and went to university and started seeing other things and understanding how, because that was the problem. And I realized very quickly that it was, all these civics stuff and history is on what day, what
it's
did
very
this
dry
thing happen? It's like, who cares? Like, nobody cares of exactly, maybe a sequencing thing where you see a timeline and this happened after this. And that's what led to this. That's interesting. Yeah. That's it. Just memorizing how many rivers are in this city. What are the rivers? What can you do in those rivers?
And it doesn't feel applicable, right? Like, we hear so often, like, oh, I didn't like civics or history or government. And when I was in school, it didn't make sense to me. Like, so much of what you do in school is really about just kind of basic knowledge gaining, right? Like, knowing what something is, how it works, or how it's supposed to work, right? It's a lot of theory. And that just doesn't feel real to kids, especially. Like,
you can still even get all those things without the July 4th in 1876.
Exactly. Like, and that's our goal. It's like, we want people to walk away like, one, I want you to know, because you have to know, but you also need to know what to do with it, right? And that's where we think gaming really comes in, is that it gives kids the opportunity to practice. The content is great. We love the content. I think it's really important. But what I always talk about is, like, you're probably going to forget a lot of the content when you're like 30, 40 years old, but you have to know how to act. You have to have the skills to
or maybe even 2 weeks
from
now, you'll forget everything.
Exactly. Some of us do, right? And so we think giving kids opportunities to play with those skills and do it is what's going to make the impact of like how they're participating later on down the road.
Absolutely. And we were talking about toddlers. If you hear anything in Gagers or Kerry, it's my daughter just walking around the next. Like, I have an isolated door and wall. There's no way like that. This is not a real studio, so that happens. Kerry, let's actually jump into story mode. You've done all these things and you have some exciting experience. How about a time where things just did not work out? Maybe eventually they did, and we want to get there too, but how does that fail or first attempt in learning go? Like, we want to be there, feel the pain and take those lessons and not feel the pain ourselves in our own stories later.
Failure happens a lot in game design, right? Like, you have these big ideas of how something's meant to work or like what you want it to look like. And then you actually put it in front of somebody and it just like goes completely sideways. We had that happen. We were designing a game around the court system, and we call it courtship. And the earliest version was kind of this pitch deck style experience where the students would get this kind of really random prompt and make a pitch to try and win a case, and then it would like move up through the court systems. And the farther it went, you had to keep adding to that pitch. And we first tested it with like a small group of adults because like we're not in schools right now, and so that can be difficult to do. So we gathered up some colleagues, and there's always that one person, right, that is willing to just like dive feet first into this and just let go of all inhibitions and do something. And it went super, super sideways, right? Just things he was saying were like really inappropriate. You're like, oh no, this is a workplace, dude. You can't do that. We can't say that. And it just made us realize how much the likelihood of students doing that as well, right? If you've ever been
if
in
an
a
adult in the
classroom,
workplace with all that, awareness of, and the job and all, and the money around the job, and like if they still do it, imagine
a
teenager.
kid, right, who has like no ability to like self-rationalize what's going on, and
10%
like
of that filter at best.
exactly, yeah. And so we're like, okay, that's probably not our best choice, right? That is a constraint. We're going to have to pull in some constraints here to make things a little bit more focused, and to really think about also the teacher experience, right? We want teachers to feel like this is safe to do in the classroom, especially in the climate that we have these days, where like some teachers are like, if it doesn't fit exactly into my scope and sequence, if it doesn't fit exactly into my standards, like they can be a little closed off to new things. And so we really realized we had to put some parameters on things. We had to really think through what ambiguity there is in the game and how to kind of structure that in a way that makes it feel safe for both students and educators. And so we kind of revised that, gave it a different focus while keeping some of that whimsy, but kind of putting those guardrails on it for teachers.
giving it some stuff just to make sure
Yes.
that some limits in that sense. And that's good. We were talking about toddlers, they need love and all that, and they need some limits. Like this is something you can't do, like approaching the kitchen when it's hot, putting your hand there is just, I'm not going to let you test how that feels so not to do it in the future. That's something you're just not going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
good lesson on testing for what not to have happen.
Fantastic. Love it. So if you were to approach an experience, and I'm sure you've done stuff after, how do you do it differently to make sure that this is sort of considered, this mindset of, oh yeah, you can do many things, but not just everything?
Not just everything. We always kind of start with our ultimate goal. So by like focusing in on like one concept or one skill, like we found that, in civics and history of government in particular, it always feels like there's so much you need in order for something to feel successful. And I think that's not true. That you can build conceptual knowledge and some content knowledge by focusing in very, very tightly on one thing. And so that's kind of how we approached most of our games, is what's the one thing, like if they walk away with nothing else, what's the one thing that they've been working on in that game? And so that has been kind of our primary focus. So for example, like communication, or in particular, communication to build for collaboration and consensus building is something that's super hard for teachers to do, right? It's one thing to tell students, like, you need to collaborate and you need to learn how to compromise. And this is how you do it. Like, that is not very fun for kids to do. And it also doesn't really transfer in the long term. So, we've really focused several of our games on that particular skill and finding ways to help them negotiate with each other in different circumstances.
Awesome. I love that. Quick pause. I think you bumped the table for a sec. I heard that entirely. Just watch out in case.
Sorry.
No worries. So Kerry, we went through that difficult time. What are the lessons you learned? And of course, you've also had very successful things that have happened. And even that experience, I'm sure, was successful eventually. Can you talk about a time where things went well, like a success example, a proud moment, something you want to share? And of course, let us know what do you think helped you get to that point.
Yeah, something that went well and success. It's hard to pick stuff, right? Like
Who's your favorite kid?
it's it's been you know what? We have a game. It's called Fed Up, and it's kind of niche. It is really about the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, like the whole constitutional debate following during ratification and all of that. And it's kind of based along the lines of priorities. If anybody is kind of trying to find something that it compares to, and we took it to a conference last year, and we had staff who aren't typical teachers kind of model it at our booth that we were hosting. And the most hilarious thing seeing was to see people who like understand what the content is, but maybe like that's not their primary role in our organization. Like these are mostly like our salespeople, our development people, people who like don't necessarily have degrees in history like our content team does, right? And like to see them get super excited about the game and get into it and do that kind of competition, and where they're pulling crowds in from the people walking by the booth, and all of a sudden you're like hearing people like shout about like they got it right. It's like it can have like it works. To see something like that is really exciting because it says that there's something to not just the mechanic of how the game is working, but also that the things that we were trying to get out of it, the collaboration, the communication between people, the negotiation, the ability to kind of disagree with people, which is something that we really kind of hone in on. Like there were arguments happening in a really kind of playful way that shows like, oh, we can disagree on something and still like walk away like high-fiving because we had a lot of fun over this game. And that to me is like really exciting to see when we were thinking about that were some of the outcomes we were looking for.
That sounds awesome. Absolutely awesome. Like getting people excited about these things is like primarily exactly what you're doing. So
It's
couldn't
like
be more on spot, right?
the game itself has like arcane terms and weird vocabulary, and you're like, nobody's gonna like, are people really gonna get excited about this? And they do. And it just draws out something in people of just like they might not 100% understand what the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists are, but they're getting the concept of what we're trying to get to, in that people can disagree and walk away still friends.
Awesome. Awesome. Kerry, if you well, when you approach new projects, right? You just we're talking about this one, when you finish that one or when the next one is coming in. What does that look like? Do you have a process? Do you have a system? How do they come in? How do you figure out what you want to do? How are you going to do it? What are the mechanics? What's the game going to look like?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned earlier we always kind of start with like, what's that one concept or skill that we're trying to focus in on? And that is really our key, because when we think about the difference, we've kind of taken a lot of the skills that we think are important in civics and we've mapped them to various mechanics. So thinking about what are those kind of civic outcomes in terms of like, can you take different perspectives? Can you negotiate and build consensus? Like those kinds of things. And then we have kind of a chart that we've been working with that looks at those skills and finds them like matches with a mechanic that we might want to draw out. And so, for example, I try to think of one of them. If we're trying to get students to see a different perspective, role play becomes a really important thing. We have a game that explores different regimes. It is called regime, but it looks at different kind of government systems. And, we want them to see those different perspectives of like why people might find some government systems a little bit more like appealing than others. And I mean, our goal is obviously always to like, hey, direct democracy or representative democracy are our ideals. But at the same time, like having students take on those different perspectives puts them in the place to better understand what those kind of systems are meant to do or how they work. And so taking on different roles is really important to us. And so we kind of start from there. And those are kind of our two big design ideas. And then from there, we also try and find things that, because these are going into the classroom, things that might reflect other games that teachers and students know. Our Party Favors game uses like mechanics like Pictionary and telephone. So those are things that people already get. So we're hoping that because they already understand the general mechanic or they have a game to compare it to that they have played and they're familiar with, they're able to pick it up a lot faster in the classroom because we know those kinds of time constraints for an educator are really can be a big roadblock. So we're looking at those kinds of ideas. We also think a lot about the debrief in our projects. We think that is really kind of one of the most important pieces is taking that experience and then mapping questions to help teachers kind of break it down for kids so that they can better understand kind of what they were doing, why they were doing it, and then how that might apply in a future circumstance.
Sounds brilliant. I love it. Debriefing, I always say it when somebody mentions it. For me, debriefing, especially when it comes to learning and games, gamified systems, etc., is key. Like otherwise, maybe you even learned something, but if you don't realize you did, it's
Yeah,
not going to cement well.
exactly. That's what we think is probably one of the most important parts. And like one of the things that we are really, really intentional about doing. And just trying to turn something into like, yeah, that was really fun to like, oh, this really matters to me and to what we're trying to do. And that has become just kind of a driving focus in our design process.
Very cool. Love it. Carrie, is there a best practice, something that you say, well, when you're doing a project, do this thing, and it's probably going to make it at least better?
Well, debrief was one of those
Yeah, I was
things
going to
that I was
say
going to think
it could
like
be one of the things we discussed already. That's okay.
yeah. But also I would say testing is really important, especially in an educational setting where it's like these are things that are going into the hands of educators and teachers and students, and we don't have a whole lot of control over what's going to happen. Kind of as we talked about earlier, it's having those opportunities to test it in different ways and with different populations or different kind of circumstances to find all those little kind of places where things might go wrong. And obviously we can't solve all of them, but enough that we can confidently say this will work in your classroom if you give it a try.
Makes sense. Testing. Love it. Carrie, you probably heard a bit of Pete before on an interview in the podcast. I don't know if you've heard any other episodes, but now you have a feel of what the interviews tend to look like. Is there anybody that comes to your mind you say, well, I think I'd be curious to listen to this person, or this person would be really interesting for even for you? Like, I would like to hear this person's perspective.
Yeah. The person who kind of comes to mind for me is Dr. Susan Rivers. She's with I Thrive Games and the History Collab. And so her work kind of sits at this intersection of like game design and adolescent development and like social emotional learning, which is like where a lot of like civic learning happens. They're creating some really cool games that help teens explore things like identity and empathy and like civic agency and things like that. And I think she'd bring like a really unique experience. She's both a psychologist and a game-based learning advocate. And so they've been creating some really cool classroom tools both like digitally and in person that help students kind of think through these kinds of like civic scenarios.
Love it. Can you repeat her name, please?
Yeah, Dr. Susan Rivers with I Thrive Games and the History Collab.
Love it. How about a book that you would recommend the engagers? Which book would it be and why?
Yeah, the book that we go back to right now as we're designing games and elementary materials is The Power of Play by David Elkind. And also, if you have young kids, probably a great book to read because it's really just about how we learn through playing. And so maybe not necessarily about game, but this idea like that play gives us these kind of safe spaces and low risk environments to kind of test out real life skills and things along those lines, which has been a big influence for us as we design, because that's really kind of where we've been thinking like, these are the ways to practice civic skills in a safe environment for students and test those things out in low stakes kind of way. And I think, it just reinforces the idea that, play is important, not just as a child, but all the way through adulthood.
Super, super important, The Power of Play. And, just with the title, you already know that something strong is definitely coming in. Kerry, in this world of game design and helping kids, like all the stuff that you do, is there something that you would call, or what is it that we could call your superpower? That thing that you do at least better than most other people.
My superpower has always been, since the time I was a classroom teacher, has been turning like complex and boring content into experiences kids actually want to participate in. I took a lot of pride of that as an educator, and now today. I think whether it's gameplay or storytelling or just other kind of projects and things that make things active and surprising and social is what I do best. And I'm always kind of thinking like, how do we move passive learning to something that students can feel and test and remember? And that's what's most important to me. And because when they're problem solving or role playing and laughing or disagreeing, they're more engaged, and that's where real learning happens. And that's my favorite thing to do, is build out those moments.
Sounds beautiful. How about your favorite game? And it could be one of your games, or it could be a commercial game. Like it could be something else, just to get your mind out of those, because I know picking a favorite child is particularly challenging. Let's call it that way.
Yeah. I have two favorite games, and they're like more party games, I guess, because I used to do a game night with some friends before we moved, and my two favorites are Space Team and Cranium. And so I really enjoy those kind of very social games. I enjoy chaos as well, which is what Space Team kind of brings to the plate, is that kind of like everybody's trying to accomplish something. Things are going a little wild. You've got people yelling random like sci-fi commands out that you like don't understand. You're trying to figure things out in like a very short amount of time. But it's also like great team building kind of stuff. We've used it in Office for some team building activities. And then Cranium is just, I love the strategy behind Cranium, which people are like, oh, there's no strategy. I'm like, but you got to pick a team. And like, you have to think about all the different modes of like what you're doing under Cranium, and like who's going to be the best people to help you win all those different kinds of challenges. And so like, to me, it's kind of a little bit more, yeah, the challenges are fun, but it's like, okay, did I get the right people to go on this like little journey with?
Love it. That sounds absolutely brilliant. Kerry, we're getting to the end of the interview, but before letting you go, is there anything else you want to say? Any final words, any final piece of advice? Of course, also let us know where we can find out more about what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
So it's all yours.
Yeah, I would say probably like my little advice for people, if especially educators out there. And I recently did a session at ISTE on this, was like start small. If you're interested in using games in the classroom, It doesn't have to be a whole game. I think a lot of times educators feel like they're like, if they're not doing the whole game, they didn't really try it. And it's like, well, the point is to kind of, bring in some of the aspects of it. You don't have to go full force into it. So start small, pick one mechanic, maybe that's role play or negotiation, and then build a short activity around it. Right? You don't need a full blown game to begin bringing play into learning. It can be as simple as assigning those roles, or giving them a secret objective to discuss to use during their discussion. And the key is really to think about like what habits we want to build, particularly if we're thinking in that civic space, and build around that. So that's my kind of advice for people. And then, you can find the games that I referenced in terms of the ones that we built. Those are all online on our website, which is billofrightsinstitute.org. All of our materials are free for educators. Those games are available as both a free print and play download. And if you're interested in purchasing them, we do have a store where you can get the nice, pretty box of cards as well. And then you can find us also on Instagram under Bill of Rights Institute, Facebook under Bill of Rights Institute, and on X as BR Institute on X. And then you can find me personally on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a social media person otherwise.
Sounds great. Those sound like great places to find out about what you guys are doing. And Kerry, once again, thank you I know it's early for you today. You're starting off your day. We're ending our day here in Madrid. However, thank you very much for taking this time, for sharing your knowledge, your understanding, your experiences. However, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey, Engagers, and thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast. And since you're interested in this world of creating motivation, engagement, loyalty using game-inspired solutions, how about you join us on our free online community at Professor Game on School? You can find the link right below in the description, but the main thing is to click there, join us. It's a platform called School. It's for free, and you'll find plenty of resources there. We'll be up to date with everything that we're doing, any opportunities that we might have for you. And of course, before you go on to your next mission, before you click continue, please remember to subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.